Hey YouTube, I'm Ross Stewart with Stewart Media Digital, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Helios 44M-4. So this is a 58mm f2 vintage lens from the Soviet Union. This was made from 1958 through 1992. I picked this particular copy up at a flea market in Poland. Luckily, it caught my eye and I got it for something like $9. It sells on eBay and on Amazon used, obviously, for about $50. And it's really a very interesting lens, especially for that price point. The really cool thing about this is it gives a swirly effect to your bokeh. So we'll take a look at that in just a second, but first let's go over the build quality real quick. Everything about this lens is manual focus with a minimum focusing distance of about 1.5 feet or half a meter. And the aperture is clicked manual aperture from f2 to f16. And something interesting about it is it goes by half stops with the aperture instead of thirds of stops, which we see in modern lenses. But the click is pretty nice, it's pretty satisfying, and the focus ring it's got a really long throw, which can be good for video use, but we'll test that out in just a second. And it does telescope. So as you focus, it sticks out quite a bit. And something interesting I've never seen before is it also telescopes in the back. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, so let's take a look at the bokeh, the sharpness, and focusing in video. So I got some shots of my favorite FBI Dallas mug here. So let's take a look at, first off, the sharpness. So this is wide open at f2 and it's looking pretty good. Considering what this lens is, I'm actually pretty impressed with the sharpness. I wouldn't call this a soft lens by any means. But just for comparison's sake, let's compare it to my Sony Zeiss 50mm 1.4. Now this is a $1,400 lens, so it's not really a fair comparison, but it's just nice to have something to compare sharpness to. So here in the center, you can see that the more expensive Sony Zeiss lens is way sharper, but that's kind of to be expected. This is an old vintage lens. So all things considered, I think it's doing really well. Now let's zoom out and at f2 take a look at the bokeh, because that's what this is really about. So you can see around here and here and here, and if we had lights all around, it would really create this interesting swirling effect. Now it's not really swirls, it's just the bokeh balls are ovular around the center point, so it looks kind of swirly. And the bokeh is really soft. Like I was just saying, it's not round, which is typically considered a good quality, but in a lot of ways I find this much more interesting. So up here, the bokeh looks really soft. We've got some harder balls with some edges, but they're still really cool. Down here, we've got some crazy bokeh balls. This is because it's reflecting off the counter here, but I think it all still looks pretty cool. So let's stop down to 2.8, and the balls start to round out a little bit, or not round out, because you can actually see the aperture blades here, which is pretty interesting. Usually they're rounded and you can't see these bumps, but they are becoming a little bit less swirly. So let's stop down further to f4, and you can really see the shape of the aperture here, and they've become, it's sort of lost its appeal at this point. It just looks sort of like typical bokeh balls with sort of with the aperture starting to close up a little bit. And just for thoroughness, let's take a look at f16. The only real bokeh you can see, these aren't sharp or in focus, but they've kind of lost their bokeh quality. But these bokeh balls up here really show the shape of the aperture, and they have at this point completely lost that swirly look. But I think we have gained some sharpness with the increase of aperture. Again, here's f4 versus f2. So now let's take a look at a motivational sign in my sister's apartment to look at vignetting, distortion, and something else. The first thing I noticed is it does have quite a bit of vignetting at f2. And then the second thing I noticed is look at how soft this is at the top. This isn't even, you know, people talk about corner sharpness. I don't really care about corner sharpness because if you're putting a subject in the corner of your frame, I honestly don't really know what you're doing, but here you can really see this looks really sharp here in the center, and you don't have to go far from the center to start losing that detail really quickly. This is pretty bad. But again, if you're putting your subject right in the center of the frame and you're really going for those swirly bokeh balls around the middle, you can still get some really cool results with this lens. So let's stop down to 2.8 to take a look. And there's still quite a bit of vignetting around the edges, but this is crazy soft up here. Center sharpness, super sharp. You can see the detail, the texture of this canvas, and up here it is just crazy. So let's stop down. We're gonna stop down a couple stops. This is 5.6. And here we have gotten rid of most of the vignetting, and it's starting to sharpen up a little bit, but it's still fairly soft up here. So it seems like the aperture doesn't really affect the sharpness around the edges, or it's not even around the edges, because it's like really, it's like center, center, and then here it starts to go a little bit. So it doesn't take very far from the center to start losing focus. And I really don't see any distortion, but this is 58mm. It's not very typical for a lens like of this focal length to have a ton of distortion. So one thing I forgot to mention in the intro is that I did have to use an adapter to get this onto my Sony body. But the cool thing about that is you can get adapters to put it on different camera models, different camera makes, that is. One drawback though is that it does not have any electronic contacts. So up here you'll see it didn't give me any aperture data or any other data. But of course ISO and shutter speed come from the camera, so we still see those. Now we're just gonna do a quick video focus test. Since it is manual focus only, I just wanna see how easy it is to rack focus and nail focus when switching between subjects in video mode. And the way I'm testing this is in a complete run and gun style. If you had a focus puller or you set it up on a tripod, it would be a lot easier for you. But I wanna test it handheld, run and gun, and see what kind of results we get. So, rolling in here, I feel pretty good about that focus. The focus ring is, it's got a long throw and it's got a good amount of resistance. But I might even say it's a little bit too long. Focusing between subjects, you have to do more than a full rotation, which can be really hard if you're run and gunning and doing it by yourself. And I'm not even going from minimum to infinity, and I'm still having a little bit of trouble getting it all done in one throw. But it is really smooth and it does feel really good. So with a little bit of practice, I think you could really nail it and get some cinematic rack focuses. All right, so that was my review of the Helios 44M-4. Please let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to take this lens out into the real world. I think this lens can be an absolute game changer for your portraits if you're looking to get some really interesting bokeh, or if you want your portraits to stand out from everyone else's. This lens can really do the trick. So be sure to let me know in the comments below, and also be sure to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.